On the surface, Cardcaptor Sakura is a relatively straightforward series. It tells the story of a young girl named Sakura who stumbles across an old locked book in her father's library and unwittingly activates the magic locked within it, sending a deck of enchanted cards scattering all across her hometown. In order to rectify this mistake, appease the sun guardian of the cards, Kerberos, and to keep the residents of the town safe, Sakura agrees to a contract and becomes a card captor, one whose duty it is to secure the rogue cards and prevent the calamity that they would cause by running unchecked. It's a tricky assignment, not just because of the powerful magic that she is up against, but also because she's keeping all of this a secret from her family and her friends, most of them anyway, and doing her best to juggle her duty as a card captor, her schoolwork, and her fumbling attempts at romance. And just as Sakura manages to get things relatively figured out, she encounters yet another stumbling block in the form of Lee Shaoran, a boy her age who is also hunting the cards. He claims that he has the right to the cards, because unlike her, he is the descendant of their creator, Clow Reed, and therefore, the cards are his rightful inheritance. But there's something interesting about that claim. Clow Reed has a very distinct sense of style, usually represented by the motif of the sun and the moon. But the key that seals his book of cards, the key that becomes the staff that Sakura uses to wield her magic, looks very different. It's a pink, overtly girly baton with little wings. The staff, despite being made by Clow, just like the cards and the book, looks like it was made for Sakura. When all the cards are collected, some by Shaoran, some by Sakura, a rite called the Final Judgment is initiated. Yue, the Moon Guardian, and Kerberos' counterpart, is awakened, and he challenges them both to a battle. Whoever defeats him will be recognized as the new master of the Clow cards. Sakura ends up being the winner, and as Yue acknowledges her as such, she has a vision of Clow Reed. The magician congratulates her on her success, and explains that he created inevitabilities disguised as coincidences that would give her the opportunity to grow her power. That's an interesting phrasing, isn't it? How would Clow Reed, who died long before the series began, be able to create circumstances that would lead to Sakura's eventual success? Was everything that Sakura went through preordained, including her victory? Was it really a coincidence that the staff looks like something intended far more for her than for Shaoran, despite them both being contenders in the Final Judgment? Will every comment be about how this man looks a bit like Harry Potter? Let's find out! When first watching or reading Cardcaptor Sakura, the story would have you believe that Clow Reed is just an old, super powerful magician who made the Clow cards and their guardians and then died a long time ago. But that is only a fraction of the story. Clow Reed was the son of two powerful mages, one English and one Chinese. He took advantage of his mixed heritage and learned from both Eastern and Western schools of magic, eventually combining them into something that was entirely his own. This is where the sun and moon imagery come from, by the way. The moon represent the Lee family, which Shaoran is descended from, whereas the sun represents Clow's English roots. Clow Reed's power continued to grow, and eventually it became so strong that he was nearly omnipotent. And while this might sound pretty cool in theory, it actually kind of sucked. For Clow, the ability to see into the future sapped his life of excitement and joy. Everything was already laid out before him, and even if he did something unpredictable to reshape his destiny in a way that would be more interesting, he could still see where each new path would lead. Cardcaptor Sakura is actually part of a shared universe. It is in the same universe as X-Holic and Tsubasa Chronicles, although these worlds are alternate worlds. So even though they all exist in the same universe, the world of Cardcaptor Sakura is separate from these other two stories. But even though these worlds are separate, Clow Reed is powerful enough that he is an influence in all of these worlds. It is revealed in Exholic and Tsubasa Chronicles that this overabundance of power has even more dire consequences. Yuko is the owner of a shop that grants wishes. Any wish in the world can be granted as long as an equivalent price is paid. A powerful witch in her own right, Yuko was something of a partner to Clow, and they both pooled their power in order to create the Mokanas, cute sentient bags of holding that can also act as transportation, translation, and communication devices. Very useful, especially in a universe that has many alternate worlds that one can jump to with the help of one of these Mokanas. But despite being a powerful witch, Yuko was still mortal, and like anyone else, she was inevitably going to die one day. And in the moment of her death, Clow Reed unconsciously and fleetingly wished that she would live. He didn't cast a spell. He didn't intend to alter her fate, but because his magic was so powerful, in that instant, his errant thought alone was able to freeze Yuko in time, preventing her from dying but locking her into a strange limbo where she wasn't really fully alive either. This wish had even further consequences in the form of Fei Wong Reed. While not explicitly confirmed, it is very heavily implied that Fei Wong Reed is essentially the human personification of this wish, therefore making him something like a splinter incarnation of Clow. Regardless of whether or not he was born from the wish or simply a blood relative of Clow's, Fei Wong Reed's entire life goal is devoted to achieving Clow's accidental wish and restoring Yuko to life. Even with the fraction of Clow's magic that he possesses, this man's existence proves to be a disaster, uprooting countless lives across multiple dimensions, all because Clow's power was too strong for him to control. It was likely at this moment that Clow realized that his power was too dangerous to exist as it was. The birth of Fei Wong Reed heralded doom for many, all for the sake of a single, selfish wish. It was time for Clow Reed to retire. I'm not 100% sure about where exactly Clow died. It's hard to say if he chose to pass in the world of Cardcaptor Sakura, or if he did so during his stay in the alternate world of the Kingdom of Clow. It doesn't really matter though. Either way, he died, and when he did so, his soul was reincarnated. Ariel is unsurprisingly that reincarnation. Also, his name is apparently pronounced Ariel and not Errol, like I thought literally my entire life. Like, I thought that was just how the Japanese voice actors were pronouncing Errol, but nope, it's Ariel, guess I'm dumb. He looks exactly like Clow, and their magical auras are indistinguishable from each other, which causes the cast a fair amount of confusion before his identity is revealed. He retained Clow's memories, abilities, and even has a similar nurturing but kind of a schemer personality. The only real difference is his age and his soul. While Ariel does have many things in common with the famed magician and even works to continue Clow's goal of training Sakura, he makes it clear that he is, in reality, his own person. This is particularly important because it is Sakura, not Ariel, who is the true inheritor of Clow's abilities, and he is very careful to separate himself from that. Ariel is very respectful to Sakura, and her growth is prioritized over his own. The same care is extended to Shaoran. Even though Ariel isn't technically his ancestor, he still refers to Shaoran as family, and does a fair amount of meddling in the poor boy's life. Unlike the schemes that he cooks up in order to strengthen Sakura's magic, Ariel seems far more absorbed with interfering with Shaoran's love life, aggressively shipping the former rivals with a fervor that would be considered creepy if it also wasn't really funny. You might be wondering how reincarnating would really solve anything in the long run for Clow Reed. Even if he passed on his powerful spell cards to Sakura, eventually his magic would return to the level it once was. This is something that the Cardcaptor Sakura anime never really tackles. Clow Reed's desire to no longer be the strongest magician isn't a focus here, but in the manga, this aspect is explored in more detail. In a revelation exclusive to the manga, it is revealed that Ariel is not the only reincarnation of Clow Reed. There is actually another. It would be completely understandable to assume that the physical similarities between Fujitaka, Sakura's father, and Clow are just a coincidence, the result of one art style portraying two grown men with broad shoulders, kind smiles, and glasses. But there are no such things as coincidences in this world. Fujitaka is the other reincarnation of Clow Reed, although a much more subtle one compared to his magical counterpart. Fujitaka doesn't share Clow's memories. He has no talent for magic at all. He's just a normal guy, a dad, a professor of archaeology at the nearby college. And in the anime, that's how he remains, still just an ordinary man by the end of the series. But in the manga, Ariel makes a request of Sakura, and that is to split his magic into two, and give half of it to her father. In doing so, Sakura is able to grant that last lingering wish of Clow Reed, letting his soul finally rest in peace. And with his newfound power, Fujitaka is now able to see the spirit of his dearly departed wife, who has been watching over the family since her death. A happy ending for everyone. Sort of. At the time of making this video, the sequel to Cardcaptor Sakura, the Clear Card series, is still ongoing. But something that makes a lot more sense in the manga as opposed to the anime is Ariel's inability to prevent a new rival magician, Yuna D. Kaito, from stirring up trouble for Sakura. Manga Ariel's powers have been halved by his own request, so it makes complete sense why he struggles against this new threat. In the anime, Yuna is just kind of stronger than him, with no real explanation why someone previously shown to be so powerful he can create living sentient beings, and suddenly he's struggling to maintain the magical equivalent of a phone call as long as there's interference. It's not a ruinous plot hole or anything, but it is because of this that I overall just prefer the manga's additional details over the simplified story of the anime. It just makes things make a lot more sense in the long run. But if you thought that was the last of Clow Reed's influence, you'd be wrong. There are two additional characters who serve as not quite incarnations of Clow. The first is Yukito, the human form of Yue, the moon guardian of the Clow cards. Once again, similarities that may have been dismissed by the audience are not actually simple coincidence. If you have ever had the thought of, wow, Yukito kinda looks like Fujitaka, you are canonically not wrong. As the human form of a creation of Clow Reed, it makes sense why Yukito would bear a strong resemblance to his reincarnation. This is also how Yukito attempts to justify Sakura's feelings for him. Our poor hero has harbored a crush on this guy for a majority of the series, which he doesn't reciprocate considering he has feelings for her older brother. Because of his resemblance to Sakura's father, he tries to suggest that maybe what she feels for him is a platonic familial love, which is kind of funny because, again, he's dating her brother. He's clearly just trying to let her down easily. And she realizes that, and upon asking him about his feelings for her older brother, she decides to play along with it, not wanting to get in the way of their happiness. It still hurts her, but she's a tough cookie and she recovers from the heartbreak, as many young people do. The other not-quite incarnation is the protagonist of Ex-Holic, Watanuki. His physical resemblance to Clow is so obvious that he is compared to the magician by multiple different characters. However, unlike the other incarnations of Clow, Watanuki's personality is distinctly different, lacking the grace and calm that the others portray. Instead, Watanuki is a hot-headed goofball, prone to loud outbursts and lacking any kind of filter. Eventually, he does mellow out a bit, but he still retains a very different feel from the others, despite resembling Clow the most next to Ariel. This may be because instead of originating directly from Clow, Watanuki is actually more of an incarnation of Shaoran. Not the Shaoran from Cardcaptor Sakura though, because remember, there are alternate universes at play here. This backstory is more than a little complicated. So, to put it as simply as possible, Watanuki was born from the void left behind by the absence of a Shaoran who made a wish and paid the price with his own time. So, since Shaoran was no longer there, boom, Watanuki exists. It is never explicitly stated why Watanuki looks more like Clow than Shaoran, but I have a very tentative theory that it has something to do with Clow Reed's ability to see into the future, and that perhaps he had a hand in shaping how this new soul that otherwise wouldn't have existed appears. Initially, Watanuki isn't very magically inclined. He sees ghosts and very much wishes he didn't, and becomes entangled with Yuko and her wish-granting shop because of it. Eventually, Watanuki becomes much more proficient with magic, but it's a long and bumpy road before he gets to that point. By the way, do you notice anything familiar about that magic circle there? And that's Clow Reed, the man who started it all and the reason why Sakura became the new, strongest magician. But as the events of Clear Card are unfolding, I find myself wondering if history is set to repeat itself. Like the magician who came before her, Sakura's powers are growing at a dangerously fast rate. And half of the troubles that she encounters is less due to that of a meddling Yuna D. Kaito, and more because of her inability to control her own mind. Will there be another incident like with what happened to Yuko? Will Sakura grow so strong that life will lose its luster? Probably not. Cardcaptor Sakura is overall one of Clamp's happier stories, and I can't imagine they'd take that route, but I am interested to see how Sakura is able to overcome this hurdle that felled the one that came before her. Happy Magical Girl May, everyone! Hope you're all doing well. If this video piqued your interest in watching Cardcaptor Sakura, it's great by the way, you should absolutely watch it. It's all free to watch on Crunchyroll. I'd recommend the subbed version, personally. I don't usually have like a strong dub versus sub preference, but in this instance, I think the sub offers a much more enjoyable experience. If you're interested in Tsubasa Chronicles or X-Holic, good luck, because I literally can't find any legitimate places to watch the full series online in decent quality, so you'd honestly just be better off purchasing the manga. The X-Holic manga in particular is very visually striking, and I'd honestly recommend it for the beautiful art alone. Buyer beware though, if you thought this video got confusing at any point, you got another thing coming with the later entries in both of those series. I really enjoyed Tsubasa and X-Holic, but I know that a tangled plotline isn't everyone's cup of tea, so just be aware of that before you try and get into it. In other completely unrelated news, I got a new plant. It's a peperomia. It's pretty cool, and I know my life is non-stop action, what can I say? Subscribe for more pulse-pounding plant updates, and I'll see you next time.